Hello and welcome wherever you are in the world. This is THCB Gang. It is Thursday, October the 5th. And Matthew Holt, your host, founder and publisher of THCB, the healthcare blog. And another fine guest lineup today. A couple who have been on for a while. And Kim, who somehow is back almost immediately. So Kim Bellard, writer, THCB contributor, and as I call him, ponderer of odd juxtapositions. Rosemarie Day, CEO of Day Health Strategist, author and consultant. And Vince Kuraitis, who these days is hanging out in the platform world. All right. So hi, all. Great to see all of you again. It's been yet another crazy week in politics. I'm losing count, and I myself, for my prediction of the week is that I thought that Donald Trump's businesses were all cancelled in New York by a judge, and then I found he was in court again to have his businesses cancelled. And I've completely lost track of what's happening on that side of the political aisle. And meanwhile, no one seems to be discussing what's happening on the other side of the political aisle, other than the fact that Joe Biden's very old. So, but healthcare. So let's talk about what happened in healthcare. Kim, what have you been up to?
So I've been lamenting several articles about mortality that I saw the past couple of days. Most of us know that the U.S. mortality rates have gone down the past couple of years, and not just because of COVID. But so today, I think I read that firearm deaths of young children under 18 has gone up 81% in the last 10 years. Deaths of children in cars has gone way down because we care about car safety, but we don't care about firearm safety, so that's been skyrocketing. Meanwhile, the mortality rate in the U.S. would be perfectly fine if everyone in the U.S. had the mortality rate of college-educated people. The drop in mortality is all due to people that are basically without college education and presumably on the lower income. One article said that the new measure of inequality in America is not income, it's life. The gap between the rich and the poor on life expectancy has grown much faster than the income differential. So, how much money you make and, how well suited you are in the economic divide really goes good to your life. And another article pointed out that although we may think of like deaths of despair, depression, drug use, all that kind of stuff, it's the old favorite chronic diseases that are killing people, and it's killing young people more, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, all that kind of stuff. So all of these are things that could be addressed through appropriate interventions, public health, preventive care, all that kind of things. And we just don't, because we just don't care enough. And as a result, we have third world mortality for those of us that are, well, those people that are not lucky enough to be on the right side of the economic divide. So very depressing.
Yeah, so Jeff Goldsmith, who's not on the game this week, but obviously frequently is, has just put out an article on his Substack, which will show up on THCB next week, where he's basically saying everyone's blaming the healthcare system for costing too much, but look at the stuff that society dumps on it, including this. It's like a Jonathan Metzl, who wrote that book, Dying of Whiteness, which is a lot about the sort of death and despair. But I think what you're saying, Kim, is that there's other stuff. So funnily enough, just to riff on this a bit, I was with I've been hanging out with a bunch of Koreans who come over here to sort of figure out how to sell their sell their products, and come to bring their digital health type companies to the US, and they're all going to the health conference where I'll be at next week in Vegas. And I've been helping them with very basic stuff like how to do sales presentations and that kind of stuff, and how to do their deck. And in the middle of yesterday's session, they all disappeared. And I said to one of them, where they all gone? And they went out for a cigarette. And apparently about 50% of men in Korea, or about 50% of people in Korea, adults, are still smoking. And they all went over and took a smoke break. And I was sort of recalling that, my first job in London in the 80s, I was in a city trading desk, financial trading desk. Everyone smoked on the desk, right? It was like common stuff. And somehow between sort of the Kennedy in the 60s, with the Surgeon General's report on smoking, to today, we've almost eradicated. We've had a massive public health success, essentially. I mean, smoking rates are what? Down 10%, something like that. Down from what it was, 70, 80%. And we seem to replace that success with just a massive amount of failures on other public health issues that we don't think of. But obviously, whatever the obesity epidemic, high fructose corn syrup, all these other things that we're not doing, that are leading to the things you talked about, high cardiovascular issues and diabetes and all this stuff. And yes, it's skewing very young. And somehow we got it right in one thing and not, and not, I didn't seem to bother doing it anywhere else. So I don't know. As you said, they should be preventable.
Well, the Post had an interesting analysis. They took Ashtabula County in Ohio, which is at the northeast corner of Ohio, and right next to it is Erie County in Pennsylvania, and then right next to that is Buffalo, whatever county that is. So you have Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York in 3 consecutive counties. Ohio, for the past 40 years, has been run by Republicans. Pennsylvania has been mostly mixed government. New York has been all blue, and you can see the mortality goes up by how progressive. So they're saying red state politics are literally killing the residents of their state because they don't enforce this stuff. They don't care about, the COVID was the perfect example, but it's not the only example of it. They just don't care to put the things in place that could help prevent some of these things.
Right. Well, we'll fix that in the next, 55 minutes. Vince.
Yeah.
You don't forget, your role here is to be optimistic. I don't know what Kim just said.
Well, I'm not sure I can live up to that. Maybe. So I'd like to take a couple of minutes to share some headlines and a quick summary of, I think, lessons from a book chapter I'm co-authoring with another colleague. The chapter is on AI in healthcare, and we do a case study of radiology and radiological imaging, which was anticipated to be one of the first areas of adoption of AI. So why was it the first area? Okay, first, the data is very highly standardized, more than any other area I would propose. DICOM has been around since the 90s. The workflow is standardized, and the reporting process is standardized. And it was believed that radiological images would be very conducive to neural networking type of analysis. The simple analysis or the simple analogy that's given around neural networks is you show the algorithm 10,000 pictures of dogs, and you show the algorithm 10,000 pictures of cats. And when you show it number 20,001, it very likely will be able to tell you whether it's a cat or a dog. And the simplistic analogy, which ultimately doesn't hold up, but the simplistic analogy was you show it 10,000 images of tumor, you show it 10,000 images of not tumor, and you would think on number 20,001 that it's going to have a high probability of success. This really hit a fever around 2016. And the infamous quote was given by George Hinton, who is a scholar considered the father of neural networks, was working for Google at the time. And he proclaimed that if you work as a radiologist, you're like the coyote that's already over the edge of the cliff but hasn't looked down yet. And that people should stop training radiologists right now. Well, he's since taken that back. So I'm going to pause and say there was an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, May of this year, that gave a percentage of penetration of AI in radiology. I'll do a quick quiz. Anyone want to offer what's the percentage of penetration in the field of healthcare where there was predicted to be the highest percentage or the quickest rapid adoption of AI? Any guesses?
So tell us what 10%.
10%, yeah.
I mean, I would guess 15%, but I guess it depends what you mean by it, right? How many radiologists are using some kind of AI to help them, or how many scans are being read just by AI?
And the answer doesn't get real specific, so it's pretty general. But I think you'll be, Kim. Let me give you a shot at this. You want to put in a number? 40%. Okay. New England Journal of Medicine, May 2023. AI in radiology has penetrated 2%.
2%. So that must be really this. So this is back to I was so I'm teaching this class at USF, which is a bunch of clinicians learning about, digital health business stuff. And we actually literally did the Eric Topol chapter in his 2019 book, Deep Medicine on AI, about this exact topic, right? Which is essentially how long will it take to get to replace radiology or change radiology so much that it doesn't look like what it looks today when they're sitting in the dark room, doing Surab Jar's thing where they're reading, they're just reading a thing and writing a report and never see another human being. Eric's still writing about this, but the one thing that was, I think, if you go back to the Vinod Khosla, we're going to replace 80% of doctors with AI. And then he said, we're going to replace 80% of what doctors do with AI, which is, there was an article that was quoted in Topol's 2019 book that said that if you were just doing radiology with AI or just doing it with humans, it wasn't as good as doing them together. But I think there was a study, I'm Googling it now, I can't find it. I thought there was a study this year that said actually they redid that, and that the people doing it together were the worst. It's just the humans or just the AI actually out.
And it was one specific application.
I can't remember what it was for. Can you remember the study? What was it about? I don't remember.
Yeah, they gave you. I think you paraphrased it accurately. They gave AI to analyze images. They gave radiologists to analyze images, and then they gave them radiologists and AI. And the AI was best, I believe, best overall or better than actually you would expect where the human intervention occurred.
They theorized that it caused people to second guess themselves.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I guess the question is, right, so when you read that 2019 chapter, which was there'd already been a lot of investments, he said, in hype by sort of 2016, 2017 in this area. The question is, are we at the kind of where self-driving cars were? Are we now where self-driving cars were in 2018? Everyone thought they were about to come, but they didn't show up. And then all of a sudden, I live in San Francisco. I don't live in there, but I go there enough. And same thing. There really are a lot of self-driving cars. There are. It's not like a joke. It's not like one trial one. There are whether they can make it work economically and blah blah blah. But in terms of reality, there are lots of these self-driving cars drive around. Now, they have their own issues, right? They drive into concrete, and somebody actually got hit by one the other day, or somehow got under one or whatever. And and there are there's a video of some guy, some Luddite literally smashing the self-driving car with a baseball bat, So there's issues, but there is a transformation going on in that world, which, we would expect to happen in the radiology world. And we may be at that part of the hype cycle where we're needing to build back up. But my suspicion is that the progress in the rest of AI is obviously going on very fast, obviously with the large language models. And obviously, you looked at this, Vince, you looked at this, Kim, and the radiology and pathology and imaging should be the places, you said, Vince, where this has the biggest impact and is easiest to do. So I'm wondering if, we're still in that area where we still have to figure out what do we do with radiologists and how does it change the workflow and yada, yada, yada. But my sense is that if you were to look at this, not 5 years out, but 10, 15 years out, this has got to be the area where it's got to change significantly. You're just looking at the progress being made across the board in AI. It's hard to imagine that we're not, about to see the changes, just whether it happens gradually or all at once in 10 years. That's what I don't know.
Well, I think that, so I've laid out the facts, and I think the implications are quite debatable. My own takeaway is, I don't think this nullifies in any way the long run impact of AI in healthcare. But to me, it did say it's going to take longer than we expected in this area where we expected really rapid adoption. There's still not a lot going on. And there's a lot of experimentation. And, I think a lot of it is also just due to the payment system. There are around 400 FDA approved algorithms, but only a little bit more than a handful of those actually bring in more reimbursement. So there's no economic incentive for radiologists or hospitals. And to me, that's always been a very powerful indication of how things happen in healthcare. Just follow the money. And the money isn't there for adopting a lot of these AI techniques, with the exception of where you're going to get efficiencies. And, that's where we are seeing adoption. I think we hear about AI being used for summarizing visits between doctors and hospitals. That's an efficiency value proposition. That's going to happen more rapidly.
I wrote about this a couple months ago. AI can make healthcare faster and better. Unfortunately, our healthcare system doesn't pay for faster or better. It pays for more.
So
Well,
Rosemarie, come. Sorry.
All right.
We should go to Rosemarie for her piece, but before we, you're commenting on this?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would add that there's a qualitative aspect when you look at, a common theme of the workforce feeling very burnt out, physician burnout, et cetera, nurses, all of it. And it's not just about COVID. The advent of the electronic health record has been a very mixed blessing, to say the least. And I'm in the process of doing interviews for the CEO of a safety net hospital, really meeting some interesting folks and kind of asking them to push forward on how you marry innovation and health equity and all the things. And we've been ending up talking about AI and what are kind of the safest and best uses of AI. And frankly, this efficiency part to try and preserve that the human aspect of delivering healthcare, the building of the trust, and not being keying stuff in while you're meeting with your patient or having to go home and spend 3 more hours, capturing what happened, but to actually have that, it's not just efficiency. There's a quality to that, a qualitative as human aspect that I was just hearing this described in a way that had not really captured my imagination before in terms of the possibility of solving a number of problems we're having.
Yeah, I'd agree on that aspect. But I mean, it's, as you mentioned, Vince, the sort of the ambient voice recording using natural language processing and AI to turn that into the note and taking away from typing. I literally, before I was on this call, I saw a new EMR called Avon, which had that sort of thing. I did an interview with the folks at a bridge who were doing this last week. There is so much advance and money going into these large language models, which essentially is what is a spin-off of that. Anthropic has money, OpenAI, obviously, Google and others have got these technologies going. Yes, some of them need tuning for healthcare and all the rest of it, but you can see that's already starting. That's like the self-driving car in San Francisco. It's actually already started. There are a bunch of people now where this is now that they're doing that. They're having the conversation. It's going straight into the Epic Note, and the doctor just has to look at it and sign off.
Even if it's only 80% right, that's still a huge amount that's already in there. And
80% is probably more right than when the doctor was typing. It's about self-driving cars. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be better than humans. And then if we have time, I'll tell you a horrendous story. Well, it's a lucky story. I'll tell it. Yesterday, I'm crossing the street in San Francisco. I'm not crossing the street. I'm waiting at the light. There's a 2-lane road going this way, but I'm walking, across it on the right-hand side. So as it happens, the traffic has gone through the intersection, but the last truck, there's a traffic jam. So the last car, which is right by where I'm crossing the street on my right-hand side, is a big panel van, so you can't see past it. And then the light turns to white, so we start walking. But then I hear a siren, and it's getting louder and louder. Oh my God, that siren's coming up it's a 2-lane. The siren's coming up the other side of the road. And there was a woman walking in front of me, and she's got her headphones in. She's walking a little bit faster than me. And I suddenly realized that she hasn't heard the siren. She's just walking, and the siren, I think, is coming our way. So I shout, hey. And finally, I'm not quite close enough to grab her. She's maybe 3 yards in front of me. I mean, I could have made a desperate lunge and probably been arrested for assault. And I shout, stop, as loud as I can. And just at the moment she stops, and literally, boom, the ambulance goes right past. It would have killed her immediately. And then she turns around, looks at me, looks back, and then walks off. I mean, she must have been in shock or something. But I thought she was going to say, "Thank you for saving my life," but nothing. But the point is, a self-driving car with its radar should have known there was a human being behind the truck, right? That would have worked out. Whereas the ambulance driver had no clue. And I think you're going to have, to me, that's the analogy, right? Is that soon we're going to come to the point where this stuff is getting so much better and so much quicker that we're gonna the accuracy of the machine will exceed the accuracy of the human, because
I'm going to write a LinkedIn post honoring your heroic act.
I am humbled to say. Well, the other thing is, of course, I don't know. Maybe she was listening and was such an accurate walker that she was stopping anyway because she'd heard the thing and was just waiting to look around the corner. But she was in the middle of a crosswalk on white, so she was legally able to go. But our ambulance was coming past at 30 miles an hour. There's no way that they could have possibly stopped and would have seen her. So I'm very glad it didn't happen in front of me. Otherwise, I'd be having post-traumatic stress disorder and had to. Well, I guess it was an ambulance.
I think you missed the moral of the story, though. The answer is we don't need self-driving cars. We need self-driving humans.
So I think it's beyond the scope of the THCB gang to improve humanity. I don't know. Well, we could suggest some systems.
I resent that.
we could suggest. I think it's going to be tough to make to improve the. I'm just like, I still don't know what was going through her mind. It's possible she turned her head to me right at the moment and missed the ambulance go by and was wondering why this red guy was shouting at her and she couldn't hear. Who knows what was going on? But anyway, but you're right. That is the moral of the story, right? We have to deal with humans, and they're messy and they're difficult, and we don't have to be better than. We don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be better than humans.
So this reminds me, going back to radiology, this of one of the great studies I've seen in the last 10 years. This goes back 10 years. So are y'all know about the famous psychology experiment where there's a bunch of people on the basketball court passing basketball, and the person's told, count how many times the basketball goes, and a gorilla walks across.
Yeah.
And most people don't see the gorilla. So some researchers decided they were going to get radiologists. So they took a bunch of radiology results and put an image of a gorilla in the thing. And most radiologists did not notice that there was a gorilla in whatever images they're pulling up. So that's why we need AI.
Funnily enough, that's in the chapter of the Topo book that my class did last night. And the other book we're doing is like a Guy Kawasaki business book. And the thing about the basketball game, the gorilla was in both chapters had the gorilla. This gorilla's busy. I hope he's getting paid overtime, is all I can say.
Hey,
all right.
Let Rosemarie make
we never got to
comments.
Rosemarie. Yes, we're halfway through. Rosemarie, what do you want to talk about?
We're going to have the rest of the show, Rosemarie.
Rosemarie, you take the rest of the show over. Yeah.
You got it. No, well, it was hard to ignore what the circus is going on in DC and et cetera. So I'm sure we'll touch on that. But so I've been trying to keep it more local, honestly, with the healthcare focus, because that's where I feel like we can at least try to conduct some business, learn the lessons from COVID, work on my passion for health equity. And I guess I would just say that I'm encouraged by how many amazing people there are who are still seeking leadership in spite of hearing, oh, everyone's burnt out. It's just awful. The world is coming to an end. There are actually a lot of people who are continuing to carry on, are energized about opportunities that lie ahead, to build on the lessons from COVID, to work more on health equity and really get it ingrained into the system of healthcare, at least in some corners of this country. And I find that to be remarkable. And it's being, I would say, incentivized by things that are happening at the Biden administration level and the way funds are flowing into states like Massachusetts that have sought some freedom through a Medicaid waiver to really focus on health equity and to fund, measurable improvements in reducing health disparities, and just seeing how that is being carried forward into leadership conversations, into on the ground staff training and everything in between it's a kind of work that takes a long time. It is not sexy. It's not going to grab headlines, except for really annoying ones like, oh, are we doing too much DEI? Setting that aside, the people who are able to kind of tune out all of that crazy noise are really buckling down and doing some important work. And I do think it's going to move the needle. And so I'm trying to be a little bit optimistic in some corners where I can be, and seeing real work getting done, and leadership that wants to make it happen. So
Rosemarie, can you go a level deeper into that? So you talked about staff training, what have you. Obviously, I mean, and you'll see when you see Jess Peace, if you haven't seen it already, he lays out the numbers. He does a kind of mapping thing similar to what you were talking about, Kim, where he looks at death rates by county, and there's some, if no prizes for guessing where the death rates by county, are much worse than others. Which parts of the country that's all in. Those are the same parts of the country which haven't expanded Medicaid. All the stuff we know about, right? Where they tend to be very red states and red counties. We know there's lots of tension. Seems to me that one of the other things that's gone on is a sort of breakup. I mean, maybe there never existed, but people fantasize that back in the day there was like a sort of national purpose and more unity around stuff, and we had some sort of national agreement, and now we have all these radical differences which seem to be set in stone, and in some cases seem to be very cult-like. But in terms of what's going on, on the ground, and what for things like differences in treatment rates, differences in viewing, differences in levels of pain, obviously the issue around maternal mortality, all that kind of stuff. What's actually getting done? What are you hopeful about the change? What changes are getting made that you think are going to have an impact?
Well, of course, healthcare is a human endeavor. And so a really important component that people are talking about in the system is there has to be trust, and patients have to feel that they are being heard and understood. And when there are cultural differences, and scarce time, scarce resources, that stresses the system. But raising awareness of frontline workers, including even the intake workers in the ER, all the way up to the top clinicians, and educating them about implicit bias, kind of all of the kind of standard DEI curriculum. That isn't something that everybody's been trained on who's currently practicing. It's working its way through, and listening more to the patients, being very patient-centered, and practicing something that new terminology, instead of calling it cultural competence, because particularly in really diverse areas, it is hard for a person who's practicing medicine to be culturally competent in, like, think of Los Angeles, like 100 different cultures or more. There's now this notion of cultural humility and understanding that I probably don't know what your preferences are or what your pain tolerance is. I may be making assumptions, and I need to take that step back and process some humility. So this is going to sound, I know, compared to this other stuff, it sounds very touchy-feely, but that, like I say, I started with saying healthcare is a human endeavor, and really looking at how this kind of training, combined with, I'm a huge data hound, measuring results, but you have to start with the human beings and those interactions, and how you improve that, so that you aren't making assumptions that somebody doesn't really need pain meds because you think, that Black people can tolerate more pain, that kind of thing. I'm oversimplifying, but there are so many different nuances across cultures, and it's just that's a piece that I am seeing a lot of work being done on.
I mean, I think that's good, and it actually ties into the vision of AI. If AI can take the transactional stuff out and the grit work that gets in the way of all of this stuff, and allow time for more humanity, I mean, then hopefully we can flavor this. It has to be said, in many aspects, before I start ragging on orthopedic surgeons, in many areas of healthcare we've sort of trained technicians, right, rather than humanists, and I think we've underestimated the impact of humanity, empathy, the bedside manner, the human connection. They talk about it as the therapeutic connection in mental health as being very important. In fact, I saw a couple of mental health startups this week who are trying to sort of figure out how do you, in mental health is particularly important, how do you make the right connection between the therapist and the patient, because several people go through 3 or 4 or 5 different therapists before they find the right person, or they give up, right? And so who knows if this company will get anywhere, but a little startup is trying to figure out, can I use some kind of AI matching system, eHarmony / whatever, to figure out who the right kind of therapist for this person would be, to give them a better chance of, getting to the right kind of connection where the therapy will actually be able to start properly, rather than figuring out if it's the right person, the right connection. So I think that whole oeuvre, and obviously treating people from different cultures and people with different backgrounds and different levels of language, everything else, is it's going to be a huge part of that. So yes. Kim?
Counterpoint. So this is probably in Eric Toppel's book somewhere too, but going back 50 years, one of the first uses of quote AI was a program called ELIZA. It was a therapeutic thing that basically all it taught people to do, all it taught the thing to do was to basically restate the guy's questions, say, tell me more, that kind of stuff. And people who used it loved it. Even when they were told it was a computer, they still preferred it over a human therapist. So this thing about healthcare being a human endeavor, I think that's only because till now we've only had human as a choice. So I think in the era of AI, we don't know yet what it's capable of. And it goes back to your example about orthopedic surgeons. The old thing, would you rather have a cold, clinically detached orthopedic surgeon who was great at surgery, or would you a less competent guy with a great bedside manner? I think most people would choose the guy with the best outcomes, even if he's terrible at bedside. And I think we're going to be faced with dilemmas like that with AI, that do you want the most human interaction, or do you want the best healthcare outcome for you?
Well, hopefully it's not an either or. And if anybody who's ever built a team, okay, if you've got a cold robot of a doctor who is really great on certain technical outcomes, there's still all the aftermath. If you've ever been hospitalized and had to go on to the outpatient and everything like that, and get your discharge instructions and all the parts that are problematic in that pipeline that can lead to, a repeat visit. If that's not handled well, then maybe that's where you've got to have more of the warmth, human contact. I'm not gonna say that that can be replaced by something robotic.
I mean, and there's a lot of data around. I forget who was doing this, and I was having a discussion with a surgeon who said that he had done a lot of work showing that the psychological state, the mental health of the patient on the way in was a very big determinant of the results on the way out of things like knee surgery and stuff that you wouldn't have anything to do with it, which I guess kind of makes sense. But I'm trying to think. So ELIZA, there was also Ellie, who was done in the late 2000s, which was an avatar with an avatar therapist with a Kindle. You remember the Kindle when they had the thing which could track and it would look at your head movements, and I guess you could now do that. You're just using video, and that was very successful. And funnily enough, those haven't advanced. Those sort of computer-based bots haven't for mental health haven't got as far as I would have thought, given the progress that was made a long time ago with them. There are some, there's like Wobot and some others who are trying to do that, but I haven't seen it. The issue with mental health is still, there aren't enough therapists, and you'd think that would be an area where you could replace, if you get a good enough AI version, you could scale it rapidly, and that would help.
It goes back to the other point. Where's the money? I mean, they can't get reimbursed for it by insurance, so people got to pay out of pocket. So it goes back to all these restrictions we have on. But the therapy is largely paid for. I mean, some of it is largely paid for either by employers or out of pocket now. It's So I think I think that's an area where if it worked, people would pay out of pocket for bots if they thought. To Rosemarie's point, it's been made that whether it's doctors or other professionals, it's not so much that these professionals, doctors, are going to be replaced by AI, but people who don't incorporate AI into their practice are going to be replaced by ones who do. So you can't just ignore this thing. You've got to figure out how to make it work in whatever your job is, because somebody's going to do that, and they're going to be better at their job than you are without it.
The radiology example is illustrative there. There were surveys done of radiologists and students 8-10 years ago. They were fearful for losing their jobs. Today, radiologists have come to the point of view that you're espousing, Kim. They're looking at AI as an augmentation, and I don't think there's anyone who is making a case that in the foreseeable future that AI is going to replace radiologists. The footnote, though, is I think students are still wary, and a lot of this has not gotten through. And the irony is the number of scans that are being done is increasing, and there's actually a shortage of radiologists these days. So if you want to look for a profession, radiology may be the place for you to be.
It just may be rather different. That's super interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think that the interesting thing is that the technology is going to still require wider interpretation. And we've also, if you look at the history of increasing, and Sharon Brown did some great from Loud Institute, did some great work on this in her book Overtreated. Whereas that if you look at the advances in all the scanning and the imaging that we were doing, the actual advances in correct diagnosis have not gone along with that. So yeah, we're adding a bunch of technology, and it still needs to be interpreted and thought of in a different light. And I would think that there will be a role. I mean, so one of my Korean companies has figured out a way. The Korean companies I've been working with has figured out a way to turn using AI to turn black and white radiology images, which is almost all of them, into color. And I've been working with them trying to figure out, well, what the hell is the advantage of this? But their theory is that there's a thing called body composition, which is somewhat different than, sort of, say, tumors or whatever, which can be identified in black and white, and that you can do that better with this sort of AI color version that will help radiologists figure out other issues that may, I don't know, help the tumor grow faster or less fast or whatever. So that basically they're introducing a new type of diagnostic tool by this new technology. And it's going to have to require both interpretation and sort of figuring out how does that fit into both the workflow of the radiologist and the diagnostician, but also into the wider piece of, what does this do to treatment? Well, do we have to start giving people treatments or drugs or therapies or something for their body composition, as opposed to treating the tumor or whatever, and how does that work out? So as you introduce these more technologies, you're going to continue to require figuring this stuff out. But I would say that, the idea of technology that scales theoretically is to somewhat centralize, I don't mean centralized knowledge, but at least to eliminate wild diversity in how things are applied, right? That's go to traditional Henry Ford 101, put him on a production line, take away the different ways that people made the wheels of the buggies or whatever, and have them all do things one way. I know it's not as simple as that, but I mean, that should be the goal, that we should be spreading with this new technology best practices. And, hopefully AI will enable us to scale that. So I can't go back and forth. What a radiologist is, or for that matter, what a practicing clinician does, should be scaled by the technology. And therefore, they should have time to do other things. And maybe that's the human empathy stuff that we talked about, and maybe it's figuring out new care patterns and care pathways or new treatments. I don't know what it is, but it's certainly going to change. I'm not absolutely convinced, Vince, that if I was going to medical school now or coming out of medical school now, I'd choose radiology. I'm not sure it's going to be the high-paid fancy profession, in 20 years' time that it's now, but maybe.
You're making the point. I think students are skeptical, and the percentage of medical students considering radiology has dropped off, despite the fact that radiologists themselves are no longer particularly worried about being replaced by radiology.
Yeah, I mean, they're still getting
by AI.
Yeah, I guess the question is, are they still getting? There was a great chart that Ian Morrison had years ago when I started this health business, where it was the title of the chart was "Medical Students Aren't Stupid." And it had numbers of applications to residency places, on one angle, one axis, and the other axis was, income for that specialty. And I'm pretty sure radiologists were still on the top right at that point. They were making $400,000 or $500,000 a year and had the most applications to it. Plus, then you didn't have to talk to another human being, so that was pretty good. Which seems to fit the zeitgeist of today, right? You get to sit in a room all by yourself, type out reports, and never have to talk to anybody. We should get Sarab on here. He doesn't like talking to human beings that much. All right. Oh my God. Okay, so we have 20 minutes to go. We've touched on a couple of things around AI and diversity. But I think, Rosemarie, you did raise the thing that we should get to, which is the sort of politics of all of this. Right now, chaos in the House, right? No one figures out who the speaker is. We don't know if the government's going to shut down again in 45 days or not, and that obviously has big implications for stuff that's well beyond healthcare, like Ukraine and what have you. But I'm wondering, I'd like to take the group's pulse on the sort of the big picture issue, which is, if you're a Martian and you come down and land on Earth, and we tell you that, okay, here's the biggest, most important country in the world. And we've got on the one side, they have an election every 4 years, hopefully. And on the one side, we have this party in power. It seems to be sort of moderate and sensible, has passed all this policy about, renewing the economy and taking people out of poverty and all these sort of sensible things. On the other side, we have this, extremely chaotic party, which is dominated by authoritarian extremists and has a leader who is under indictment for 4 different separate crimes at the moment, plus the fact his civil, all the other stuff that he has going on. And if you listen to his ranting and raving, seems to be, very odd. And then I would tell you that if you look at the polling, apparently it's either dead even or the guy who is the crazy one seems to be winning. You go, well, that's very odd. How did that happen? What do we think is the sort of next logical steps in the whole sort of process of getting to, what's going to be a year and a month away, which is, God, we all have to go through this, right, of the next election. And what's the sort of going to be the impact of that? So I like some big picture. Does anybody have a sense about how it's going to work out that we run these primaries while Trump is on trial for all this stuff? Does anyone have a sense?
The best quote I read this week describing the situation in Washington, D.C. right now, it's so vivid. It described it as a driverless clown car.
To connect the dots of our conversation.
Oh, yeah.
I can't put it any better than that, Matthew.
Unfortunately, it's not a self-driving clown car. It's a truly
it's just streaming out. There's no one at the wheel, but someone
AI.
Someone left a brick on the accelerator, and it's just the wrong way. Oh my God! But I mean, but this is serious. And not a lot of people are talking about this, right? We've been now through 2 election cycles which were unbelievably toxic, and the first. You could argue the first time around that no one really knew how bad Trump was going to be and what was going to happen, and all that rest of that stuff. And there was this myth then that, smart men like the Mad Dog Mattis and Kelly were going to come on board and who was the guy who was Secretary of State for about 10 minutes, the Exxon guy, we're going to come and be the grown-ups in the room. Yeah. And we're going to be the grown-ups in the room, all this sort of stuff. We're past that now. We know what it's going to be. The evidence is couldn't be, we had the January 6th committee, and obviously we've got the indictments. It couldn't be clear in the face. We know that none of that is changing the views of the Republican base, and that the people that, and for that matter, many of the Republicans in the House, right? And there is this weird movement of trying to make Trump the Speaker of the House when he's not even all this weird stuff, right? But we also have never, so we kind of know that part. What we don't know is what is it like to have somebody who is actually under indictment and probably will have been convicted on one of these charges, and will be theoretically either out on appeal or actually in jail, running as president. What is that going to do? And you're talking, Rosemarie, you talked about, okay, we're not getting a lot of stuff out of DC because of the divided government, but we are doing stuff at the state and local level. What's that going to do to the psyche of the country? What's going to happen here?
Well, I think you have to think beyond just the primaries, because that's, if you just look at this, who's still identifying as Republican, it's crazy what they're tolerating and are frankly complicit with. And, I don't think a lot of Democrats are not wild about Biden, and trying to say Bidenomics and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't seem to capture a lot of people's excitement level, but you kind of have to get past that to the general, which is then where you've got the middle folks, a lot of people who don't really like the party politics, and they're going to hate it even more in this cycle. And you have a lot of what I think historian Heather Cox Richardson, who has a new book out, and I just heard her speak, talks about there's just a lot of people who want something more normal. They want to be able to live their lives. They don't want the circus, but they're not, necessarily affiliating with a party. So they're not getting the attention of the media, but there's a lot of those folks out there who just want to live their lives. And this extremism of the Trump side is way too extreme. So I hold out hope on that front. And frankly, the young people who also are fed up with climate change, all the big stuff that our generations have not solved, and they are fed up and they do not see solutions coming from the crazy side. So if they turn out to vote and you've got the people in the middle who no one pays attention to, then I think we'll be okay. But you have to kind of take a lot of deep breaths to get through what's going to be really, really hard from the news cycle perspective. For me, anyway, it's crazy making.
The most dismaying thing, and this is something I know Matthew is strong about, is that all this has taught us that really only 5 states matter. You know, it's only the swing states, you know, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, whatever the other 2 are. Michigan.
Georgia.
All the other ones, you know, California
Georgia,
is never going to vote for a Republican, you know, Oklahoma is never going to vote for a Democrat. So it's only those swing states that matter. And the national polls mean nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm with you on that. I am concerned. I mean, concerned, and it's not irrational. If you look at Biden's marks on the economy, if you look at it from the economy as a whole, especially look at the performance of the GDP, you know, the fact that we've got through without the sort of post-COVID recession that everyone thought was going to happen. You know, we've had it, but we have had a couple of things going on, right? Obviously, inflation. Just because it's calmed down doesn't mean the prices aren't still high, right? Because
they're not going down.
They're not going down, right? And you actually don't want deflation; it's a bad thing. But there is going to be some parts of the economy which are going to go into deflation. I'm thinking of commercial real estate and other areas like that. But you know, that's impacted people massively. The other thing that's impacted people massively is interest rates. You see the housing market in this country stop because people, you know, people who are selling to buy can't. You know, I'm personally, I think we have a 2.25% mortgage or something in our house. If I wanted to buy another house now, it's 7.5%. It's just stopping the people being able to buy a house, and that is impacting new home ownership a lot. So I think people are looking at that and going, you know, that somehow is Biden is getting blamed more for that than any kind of credit that is coming to them for kind of managing the economy through the soft landing, doing this sort of the transitional stuff in the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, doing the Infrastructure Act. And then some of the stuff that was, I don't know how much it impacts the actual politics because a lot of these people don't vote enough, but things like, you know, the end of the end income tax credit and that kind of stuff, there's going to be some blame. So if you look at the numbers, the numbers on handling the economy are awful, right?
Just this week, the same day that they deposed the speaker, there was I think it was a NBC poll showed that the Republican lead in the handling the economy is at its highest point ever.
Yeah.
And my takeaway is that I think now that a lot of voters, when they think of the pandemic, what they remember most is not the deaths and not the the supply chain issues. It's that, gosh, prices sure were low and inflation was low. So like that, they're nostalgic for how low prices were during COVID, and they forget all the bad stuff.
Well, I mean, the other thing about that is that there's a sort of zeitgeist that who was in charge in COVID and who was closing down the economy. For some reason, a lot of that blame has been laid on the Democrats and Biden, even though he wasn't in charge till more than a year in. And there was even
and the lockdowns have been lifted by that.
Yeah, and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, it's no question that the Democrats are being accused of being this, you know, the DeSantis and others are like accused of being the parties of the lockdown and all that stuff. And we have, you know, we talked a lot about the public health stuff. So somehow that's got mixed up. And even though unemployment is very low, you know, there are all of these issues which so you know, the Biden administration hasn't had the credit. So I'm not sanguine. I mean, I'm worried about what happens next, but I'm also worried about where this puts. I mean, it's very, very hard to have. I mean, look at the Republicans in the House is the classic example right now. Rational things which you would think would be, okay, that there's enough of a majority of the body politic as a whole to think about. Things like support for Ukraine against Russia and that kind of stuff are really, you know, coming into question. But we're really struggling to pass any kind of rational legislation. We're going to go through these, you know, shutdowns. Maybe we go through these 45-day cycles of about to hit the government shutdown again. I don't see, you know, we're kind of on our own, and there's a lot of things we still need to do. Yes, we did a lot, there was a lot done in legislation in the first 2 years of the Biden administration.
I've seen a couple of things that said that, you know, Jim Jordan is the likely best candidate, and Jim Jordan has never been a legislator. All he is a flamethrower. So yeah. If he's the speaker, I think you can kiss the 45-day continuing resolutions goodbye. He's not interested at all in compromise. All he's interested in is in demonizing the other side.
I mean, I'm concerned sort of short term, but also long term, because that'll put us through a process where we're kind of, Rosemarie says people are looking for normalcy, and I think if you stripped out what's going on the other side, the Biden administration has been pretty dull and normal. I mean, yes, they passed some big legislation, and you can argue back and forth, but it's not been like the craziness. It's not even been the craziness of the Trump administration, or for that matter, the kind of glamour and hipness of the Obama administration, or the whatever the hell, or the.
But he's actually done infrastructure, like literally.
Yeah, no, I'm saying he's done it, right? He's done a bunch of stuff, but stylistically,
the moral of the story to me is
sorry, Kim.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm saying stylistically, whereas Bush did, whether you liked it or lumped it, Bush did really big things. We're going to go and invade Iraq. We're going to, we're going to invade Afghanistan. We're going to do all this. There was a lot of big things happening. Obama was, did the recovery, but also stylistically was a sort of young, glamorous guy. Trump was crazy. And, strikes me that Biden is much more sort of the, FDR type. That's not FDR, Eisenhower type, sort of stable, elderly leader type. Now, whether we want somebody that old to go on for the next 4 years and whether alternatives and yada yada, all that conversation aside, it seems to me that we're not going to get. We're going to go straight back into this election cycle, which is going to be nuts. It's going to be even nuttier now than it was 4 years ago and 4 years before that. And I just am really concerned about the impact on people and, people's mental health and other things. I go through this again. I would like more boring normalcy. And by the way, random comment, but it's true. My home country of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, the Tory party, which is now in power, has been in power for 13 years, has decided that Trumpism is the way to go. They literally had their conference this week. The prime minister and these other people are starting to make up facts about what the opposition wants. And they've been called out by the British press about it, but they're now all decrying wokeism and the British prime minister made an attack on transgenderism, talking about men being men and women being women, and they're starting to really scrape the barrel of their right wing nationalism as their sort of next best hope. I mean, they're going to have an election next year, I assume.
All right, let me.
But it's not. This is spreading. This is not good.
No, it's not good. I'm going to go back to something I'm taking some solace from, which is this historian perspective. When asked, has it ever been this bad before? What can you compare this era to in our country? And Heather Cox Richardson, who, by the way, has the most subscribers on any Substack, of anybody's Substack platform, she is head and shoulders above. I forget, it's millions, I don't know. Anyway, she said that the 1850s are very similar to where we are today.
Look what happened then.
Didn't we have a war after that?
But yes, it was.
We're taking solace, but how?
Because we actually did not let enslavers rule the country. Yes, it was incredibly painful, but there were leaders who emerged, things that happened that if you look at the notes in the 1850s, nobody thought would happen, but it was getting so bad. People like Abraham Lincoln, others started to come forward and look for a new way that would unify the country. Yes, of course, we went through a horrible civil war, but she claims that in the 1850s, it was a foregone conclusion that that the slave states were going to prevail because they had the economic power, they had all the things. I'm not enough of I can't debate that fact, but I put a lot of faith in people like her who are taking this much longer view that it doesn't happen automatically, but if stuff gets bad enough, there are people who wake up, and I don't want to conflate that with being woke, who say, no, this is taking it too far, and this is not the country we want to have. So
I forget the statistics, but there is an appallingly large number of Americans who think that civil war is the only thing that's going to help our country get through it. I mean, it's like 30% or something like that. I mean, that is totally scary. Go back to Matthew's point. I think that Joe can't make a presidential run on his accomplishments, on inflation, on the economy. He's got to go to democracy is at risk. Just look at the abortion extremists, because I think young people, as Rosemarie was saying, young people will respond to that, and that is it. What's at risk? People like Jack Kelly and even Joe Manchin are saying, I don't think democracy can survive another Trump administration. There's no guardrail. So I think he's going to lose the economic thing. He's got to make it on something bigger that can get people going.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the abortion thing is a huge thing. There seems to be a large number of Americans who like the concept of autocracy and authoritarianism, but which is a separate problem that we haven't done a good job on. But I worry about, and I guess we knew this happened as soon as we had the midterms and the House got lost, and everyone was happy the House only just got lost, and now we have the chaos with the extremists putting McCarthy sending him back to Bakersfield or whatever they're doing. And maybe we get Jim Jordan instead, God help us. But it worries me that, you're going to have this. I don't know if, and the Senate, by the way, looks awful. The map looks awful for next time around. So I don't know if we're going to have any possibility of any meaningful legislation. Maybe you're right, Rosemary. Maybe calm heads prevail. We get some moderate Republicans out of somewhere who could coalesce. Although they're all leaving that, Romney and the rest are all leaving, and they weren't that moderate. If you look at Romney's proposed, you remember there was a great focus group where a bunch of pollsters took Romney's proposal for his 2012 platform to a bunch of focus groups, and most of you didn't understand it and just didn't believe that anybody would propose that. They regarded, and that was his policies around Social Security, Medicare, and what have you. So it's not like the moderate Democrats are that, the moderate Republicans are that moderate. But, the question is, could you get a middle that politically holds to start passing more legislation, doing other stuff? Because there's more we need to do. We did, the Inflation Reduction Act was a lot, but there are whole areas that were in that infrastructure bill and the original, Build Back Better, which never got done. And we talk about this on this show every week about the stuff that needs to get done legislatively, that needs to change in healthcare and outside of healthcare that's not getting done. And I don't see any way of it getting done. I know.
There's actually a lot of agreement on that, except for the extremists are holding it up.
Yeah, but there's 75% of the country can agree on stuff, and it still won't get passed. And now we're going to have, let's assume maybe the House comes back to the Democrats, but probably the Senate on the map. There may be some hope of keeping it but if it's a very close election like it was last time, I think the Senate goes. And don't forget, a lot of Senate seats last time that the Democrats thought they were going to win. They won Georgia ones, which was kind of a miracle, but going back to 2020, some of the seats, Maine, North Carolina, others they thought they might went away. I don't see you don't see the kind of mass. Maybe you're right, Rosemary. I don't see the kind of mass revulsion to the Trumpist, extremist, the guy's a criminal, all the people endorsing. That still seems to be holding sway in the primaries in those parties, and all those Republican senators, who are the few who are kind of quasi post him, are quitting because they don't want to get primaried, or they don't want to deal with the crap that if you're Mitt Romney, you can afford a private force, but they don't want to deal with the amount of harassment they're getting from the extreme right, and that is stuff that is it doesn't, to me, it's not. Everyone in England's talking about, is this 1930s Germany? But it does look a bit like 1920s Italy to me, where there are well-armed gangs who are kind of outside the law, who are coming around and starting to harass people, and people are starting to get worried about their safety. And we saw this in the pandemic with the public health officials and elsewhere. So it's not good.
There's an article in the Times this week about how it's now become Republican doctrine. They want to invade Mexico basically to get out the drug cartels. And Mexico's response was, if you want to get out the drug cartels, stop selling them arms. There you go. But the Second Amendment right that doesn't really exist in the way that they think it does is now being used against us, and all they care about is the repercussions, not the sources of it.
No, that's always been the case, right? All the guns in south, all the people come north, and all the guns go south, and there's nothing apparently we can do about it. And the other thing I think we should, if we're rational, I'm surprised there hasn't been more politically done other than Sheldon Whitehouse about the Supreme Court and all the blatant corruption that's going on there. That's been going on for 20 years, but now it's been completely exposed. But
that could be another whole hour of a show, maybe. Pinning that for next week.
All right, we'll come back and talk about the Supreme Court, but I just think, big picture wise, I'm just consistently waving the flag is that people don't, we have to get through the next 2 years. But I'm not even sure, even if we get it through with a Biden win, I don't see us, getting access to these big problems. Now, the only good news is that a lot of the stuff, if we go back to our conversation about AI and you look at renewable energy and self-driving cars and blah, 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 a lot of the stuff, that I think technology is coming that's going to help save us. I mean, I think there are systemic big picture things which are, where humanity the technology to help serve humanity should be getting much better. I mean, you just think about renewable energy across the world and the price of that going down and the ability of us to save more people with, the mRNA stuff, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I think, big picture, there's a group, and I know we're going over time, but there's a group I subscribe to called Future Crunch, who send out this fantastic newsletter every week, which is basically the optimistic view, take the long view of, how we're doing with humanity. Think about, the malaria vaccines, how many people we're saving, think about, the access to clean water, think about the number of people in extreme poverty. That's all getting much, much better. But when you're sitting in the middle of sort of climate change induced immigration and people on both sides certainly people on the right side of the political aisle whipping this up. And as we mentioned, Elon Musk at the border firing off his machine gun or whatever he was doing. It's hard to look at that super big picture because that's not how people, emotively react. So I'm panicking about the next 2 years.
Well, perhaps Elon Musk's antics will help focus on why we need more billionaire taxes. It's going to piss enough people off, the performative aspect of that. I don't know. Maybe it'll work in our favor.
Maybe. All right. With that, let's
an ally in him. They're not going to attack him.
Oh my God. All right. Let's quickly whip around and think about healthcare in the next couple of weeks. Vince, what are you looking at?
I'll just amplify an offhand comment from Kim. We've got a 6-week extension on the budget, and the driverless clown car, which used to have a moderate who saved us from the precipice last week. What's going to happen? And that's a lot of healthcare funding that would be affected in the short term. So I think that's very much worth keeping an eye on.
Check in mid-November. I think I'll be in Italy then. Rosemarie.
Well, it is going to be a long, hard year. So I'm just thinking about how to basically muster the resources and the attention focus to work on the things I can work on, and be a platform and a voice for what I hope is democracy preserving, because I think it's going to take a lot of us doing that. I don't want to just sit here and wring my hands. I'm figuring out where are the best places to make a difference over the coming year.
Fantastic. Kim.
Well, I'm looking at the Kaiser strike and the UAW strike, although for different reasons. The Kaiser strike, Kaiser's obviously sort of one of a kind, and the strike is one of a kind too. But will they just go for money, or are they going to really push for substantive changes in the workplace and the support they get and so on, as they should, as the Writers Guild just did in Hollywood? Mostly about money, but also about job security and AI and that kind of stuff, which were foundational things that are probably more important longer term than the wages. The UAW thing, it's something I don't think they're focusing enough on. Their big complaint is the gap between the CEO salary and the worker salary. So they're saying give the worker more money. What they should be saying is, okay, let's set a target. Like what's the gap going to be? And if the CEO is going to get more money, we automatically get that more money too. So we stay in the balance, and the wealth doesn't keep going. That would be foundational, a way to redistribute, the whole billionaire class thing that is causing some of the problems that we're seeing. So
she only made 30 million last year, and the stock's been flat for 10 years. Okay. But she paid on results, is what she said in the interview I saw.
But so everybody gets paid on results in one way or another. If you don't do results, you get fired.
I'm not sure. Well, depends what results are. I mean, the one thing I'm looking at, two things, and then we'll wrap. So one is I'm off to Vegas to see Healthflot next week, and usually I get I get drunk at other people's expenses, but I also usually get inspired by seeing some of the cool technology, and I just hope it's going to filter through. But then there's a story which has been going on the last week or two, which ProPublica reported on, and actually I've missed from a year ago, which is that Philips bought a CPAP company called Respironics, I think they called it, and they've been, the dominant player in the CPAP market. And over the last 10 years, they knew that the foam they were using to stop the rattling of the CPAP machine, was breaking up and was being inhaled into people's lungs and was causing all these problems. And they definitely knew inside ProPublica has got them banged to rights and all the issues. And, they, for better part of 10 years, didn't do anything about it until they did a big recall. And there are thousands of people who were affected by this, and many of them have got these diseases. And you've got this story of a company which, we're trusting to provide really vital medical equipment. That, I don't want a huge company, albeit a European one, that does stuff, that owns all kinds of different parts of the healthcare system, that clearly isn't trustworthy. And, you can go down the line of a bunch of other aspects of companies in healthcare, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, who've been doing bad behavior. And, we never seem to get out of this. And I don't know. We're talking about leadership and talking about, people who are going to come to the forefront. We need to work on the corporate side. And this is the same story as some of the hospital systems that have been sending people to collections and all this kind of stuff. There are companies and organizations all over healthcare who are actively doing the wrong thing. And, we're going to see more of this, and hopefully we won't see more of the outcomes of this, but we need to keep focusing on that as well. All right, and on that happy note, we're going to wrap the THCB gang. You have been watching and listening to Kim Bellard from the wilds of Cincinnati, Rosemarie Day from the overly woke state of Massachusetts, it appears, and Vince Kuraitis from the not very woke state of Idaho, which apparently lost all of its obstetric care this last week because everybody decided they couldn't handle the problems there anymore of dealing with the loonies in the legislature, and they've all left. So that's it. THCB gang will be back next week. I'll have been back to health. Hopefully we'll have some stories about, I'll be sober enough at some point of this to have some stories about cool new technologies and what else is going on in the world of digital health. And thanks for watching and listening. We will see you all soon.